If the mention of the word sex is enough to bring about feelings of embarrassment, discomfort, guilt, or shame, you are not alone. Talking about sex is often one of the most difficult topics that couples navigate, and authentic, vulnerable conversations about sex is something rare more generally. At the same time, healthy sexual communication boosts sexual well-being, pleasure, and even has direct impacts on sexual function such as desire, arousal, and orgasm. Hello and welcome to Ask a Sex Therapist, a space where we explore sexuality, intimacy, relationships, and sexual well-being with curiosity, compassion, and evidence-based understanding. I'm Justine Gilliland, a sex therapist and counselor, and in today's episode, we're exploring the question, why is it so hard to talk about sex? Sex in our society is a commodity that sells, and we are flooded with sexual messaging, whether on Netflix, Instagram, or simply strolling through the supermarket. At the same time, our sexual thoughts and experiences remain shrouded in secrecy and even fear. There can be worries that talking about sex will be a shameful experience in and of itself, or can impact a partner negatively, such as hurting them with your sexual views. While not talking about sex is very normal due to the barriers surrounding sexual communication, it can negatively impact sexual intimacy, emotional connection, and overall relationship satisfaction. Over time, couples find that instead of talking about sex, they fight about it, which can lead to more pain and distress. This can further fuel avoidance around talking about sex altogether. So, what is sexual communication? Sexual communication involves sexual self-disclosure, where you share about your preferences, desires, experiences, and sexual values. Instrumental sexual communication, where you communicate about sexual health information such as pregnancy, contraceptive choices, and safer sex practices. And expressive sexual communication, which shares emotional and sexual vulnerabilities, deepening intimacy and building trust. It is important to consider that communication is a dialogue of sharing, asking questions, listening, and validating. It is not a monologue. The quality of sexual communication includes both people feeling emotionally safe to listen and share in a supportive environment. What does sexual communication actually sound like? It might sound like, can we make time to talk about our sex life? What gives you most pleasure when we are sexually intimate? I really enjoy it when you kiss my neck. It is important to me that we are emotionally connected when we have sex. Will we rely on condoms or birth control pills? Can you slow down and touch me right there? That feels really good. So, what stops sexual communication? While on paper, the idea of sexual communication may sound simple, the reality of it can be extremely difficult. There can be multiple barriers that interfere with the ability to talk openly about sex. Psychological barriers include fear of shame, embarrassment, inadequacy, weakness, or worthlessness in sharing. There can be negative beliefs about sexual desires as not normal, or negative beliefs generally about sex and talking about sex. There can also be relational barriers. For example, worry that talking about sex will lead to fighting about sex instead, worry that partners will be upset, the fear of rejection, and fear of ultimately the relationship breaking down. There are also social and cultural barriers that can inhibit sexual communication. For example, social norms about what is proper can perpetuate sexual secrecy. Some people may believe that it is inappropriate or too private a conversation to have. Social norms around gender and sex can influence sexual communication. Some women, as an example, may not think it is acceptable for them to have their own desire, keeping this hidden rather than communicating about it. And then there are some cultures and religions that may explicitly portray sex as negative and foster sexual silence. As part of social norms, there are also myths that silence sexual communication. Myth number 1: intimacy should be completely instinctual and synchronous. After all, this is what we read in books, see in movies, watch in pornography. The reality is very different. Great sex does not just happen naturally and without intention. It is like a language that you must learn and practice before you can utilize it in poetry or lyrics. Communication helps to facilitate this learning process. Partners are also inherently different individuals who differ in sexual preferences and needs. These preferences can naturally vary over time, through age and experiences. Communication allows couples to create a shared sexual identity, but also update this over time to meet evolving preferences. Myth number 2: if I say something, I'm directly critiquing my partner. For sure, if you are criticizing your partner and telling them they are doing a bad job, this is hurtful communication, which will likely contribute to defensiveness on their end. However, bringing up a sexual preference or need, or describing a sexual difficulty, is a vulnerable act of connection. In emotionally connecting through sexual communication, you are fostering healthy sexual function and protecting desire in long-term relationships. There are times where this is genuinely hard and uncomfortable, especially when sexual pain or sexual dysfunction is present. But this is also an opportunity to support each other through it. Myth number 3: if we must talk about sex or use structured communication, it will feel forced and take the romance away. Learning any new skill can be awkward at the beginning. However, the rewards of sexual communication outweigh the initial costs of awkwardness and certainly outweigh the silence. Silence leads to misunderstanding, frustration, and disconnection. Sexual communication, when you learn to do this well, leads to maximizing sexual rewards, strengthening your approach as a joint sexual team, and increasing sexual function and pleasure. Intentionality fuels passion, whereas relying on passion on its own leads to it fizzling out. Myth number 4: my partner should just know what I want and need. This is mind reading 101. Even in committed relationships, research indicates that partners only know approximately 62% of what partners find sexually pleasing and 26% of what they find sexually displeasing. Expecting that you do not need to explicitly communicate and that if your partner cared enough they would automatically know is a massively inaccurate assumption. Unfortunately, there is no easy shortcut around the hard work of good, old, reliable, clear, healthy, assertive communication. So, how can I talk about sex with my partner? Firstly, it's important to start with self-reflection. Identify your sexual needs, preferences, desires, and values. Especially if the catalyst is a sexual complaint or criticism, look deeper to find what the underlying positive unmet need or preference actually is. Prepare yourself to share clearly, gently, ask questions, and listen openly to your partner's perspective. Keep sexual conversations out of the bedroom if possible, and definitely not during sex, unless it is the use of sexual disclosure that enhances intimacy in the moment. Plan to have the conversation at a quality time, without distractions, with room to take the conversation slowly, and where both people feel emotionally safe. Importantly, agree that both people can ask for a break if things start becoming heated. So, what are some questions you can ask your partner? If you want to get the ball rolling but are unsure of what to ask, here are some starting questions. What does sex mean to you? What sexual activities does the word sex include for you? When do you feel the most pleasure during sex? What gets in the way of you being fully present during sex? How can I support you in enjoying sex more? My YouTube playlist, Let's Talk About It, explores questions and prompts to support sexual communication further. When to seek support for sexual communication. There may be times where couples need extra support for sexual communication despite their hardest efforts to communicate. This may be when most conversations about sex become a fight, both people are avoiding sexual communication completely, shame blocks openness, sexual communication is impacted by broader relationship conflict or disconnection, or couples simply want a supportive environment that facilitates intentional sharing and listening. How does sex therapy support sexual communication? Sex therapy is a holistic way to approach communication challenges in a confidential, non-judgmental, warm, and supportive environment. In sex therapy, we look beyond the surface level of a quiet bedroom, recurring arguments, or avoidance around intimacy. Together, we explore underlying emotions, internalized beliefs, relationship patterns, and personal histories that shape how you relate to intimacy. Unpacking these elements is crucial to understanding why talking about sex feels unsafe or overwhelming, which in and of itself promotes acceptance and healing. From a deep place of understanding, we can dismantle the unhelpful myths and scripts you may have internalized around intimacy and replace them with factual, empowering information. Practical tools and strategies are also explored to foster a shared sexual vocabulary. If you are in a relationship, sex therapy for sexual communication is most effective when the couple attends sessions together. This nurtures the couple dynamic and allows you to move away from viewing one person as the problem and instead approach the issue occurring between the two of you as a supportive team. I offer online sex therapy across Australia. If you would like to engage in sex therapy with me, I'd be honored to journey with you. So, here are my final thoughts on sexual communication. It is not an innate skill that we are born with, it is an ongoing practice of vulnerability that requires intention, effort, and care. When talking about intimacy feels difficult or brings out conflict, it does not mean your relationship is broken or that you are incompatible. Often, it simply reflects that the context around your relationship needs a little more support, safety, and understanding. By peeling back the layers of secrecy and shame, the focus can shift away from a pass fail test of intimacy and move toward creating a shared, flexible space that embraces connection, curiosity, and mutual playfulness. Thank you for listening to Ask a Sex Therapist. This podcast is a space where I'll be exploring common questions and themes that arise in my work around sexuality, intimacy, relationships, and sexual well-being. Topics that many people quietly struggle with, but rarely talk about openly. If you'd like to learn more, explore related blogs, or inquire about online sex therapy across Australia, you can visit my website at wellbeingcounsellor.com.au. You can also subscribe for future conversations about sexuality, intimacy, relationships, and emotional well-being.